The wind howled across the icy plains of Alaska, carrying with it a biting chill that cut through even the thickest layers of clothing. The research facility stood alone in this frozen wasteland, its steel walls rising like a fortress against the endless white horizon. Inside, the air was warm but heavy with tension. A group of scientists and military personnel had gathered for what many considered to be one of the most important experiments in human history. At the center of it all was an alien creature known as Ragnar, captured during a classified space mission months earlier. Dr. Laura Hayes adjusted her glasses as she stared at the monitor displaying live footage of Ragnar's containment cell. The creature was unlike anything she had ever seen before, a towering insectoid being with 6 legs, a segmented exoskeleton that shimmered faintly under the dim lights, and eyes that glowed like molten gold. Its movements were slow but deliberate, almost hypnotic to watch. Despite its monstrous appearance, there was something strangely mesmerizing about Ragnar, something that made Laura feel uneasy, yet curious at the same time. Standing beside her was Major Ryan Carter, a stern man in his late 40s with sharp features and an authoritative presence. His role was clear. He represented the military's interests in this project, ensuring that Ragnar could be weaponized if necessary. Carter wasn't interested in understanding the creature. He wanted results. "We need to see how far we can push it," he said, his voice firm. "If we're going to use it, we have to know it'll follow orders." Laura frowned but didn't argue. She had learned early on that disagreeing with Carter rarely accomplished anything. Instead, she turned to Daniel, a young technician who worked closely with her on data analysis. He was quiet and unassuming, often overlooked by others, but Laura valued his insights. "What do you think?" she asked softly, keeping her tone low so only he could hear. Daniel hesitated before answering. "I don't know, Dr. Hayes. It just feels wrong to treat it like a tool. Have you noticed how it reacts when we change the lighting or adjust the temperature? There's more going on here than meets the eye." Laura nodded thoughtfully. She had observed similar patterns herself, small behaviors that hinted at intelligence beyond instinct. But voicing those thoughts aloud would only invite ridicule from people like Carter, who saw Ragnar as nothing more than a potential asset. So instead, she kept her opinions to herself and focused on preparing for the upcoming test. In another corner of the room, Emily, one of the junior researchers, leaned forward eagerly, her eyes glued to the screen showing Ragnar. Unlike Laura, Emily viewed the creature purely as a scientific marvel, a chance to make groundbreaking discoveries. "This is incredible," she whispered to no one in particular. "Imagine what we could learn from studying its biology. Might unlock secrets about evolution, maybe even find cures for diseases back on Earth." Her enthusiasm was infectious, drawing nods of agreement from some of the other team members. But not everyone shared her optimism. Daniel glanced at her skeptically, wondering if she realized the ethical implications of their work. To him, treating Ragnar as a lab rat felt wrong, regardless of the potential benefits. As preparations continued, the atmosphere grew heavier. The team moved around the control room, checking equipment, adjusting settings, and running final diagnostics. Everything needed to be perfect for the test. They couldn't afford any mistakes. Outside, the storm raged on, adding to the sense of isolation and urgency. Finally, the moment arrived. Carter gave the signal, and 2 guards entered the containment area to escort Ragnar into the testing chamber. The creature resisted at first, its massive body pressing against the walls of its cell as though trying to avoid being let out. But eventually it relented, allowing itself to be guided into the brightly lit room where the experiment would take place. Laura watched nervously as Ragnar settled into position. Its glowing eyes scanned the surroundings, taking in every detail. She couldn't shake the feeling that it knew exactly what was happening, that it understood the danger it was in. Shaking off the thought, she reminded herself to stay professional. This was science, after all, not speculation. Carter stepped up to the microphone connected to the speakers inside the chamber. His voice boomed through the room as he delivered the command, "Rip her apart." Everyone froze. Gasps echoed throughout the observation area as they realized what was about to happen. Laura stood directly in front of Ragnar, having volunteered as bait to prove a point about the creature's unpredictability. Her heart raced, and her palms were slick with sweat, but she forced herself to remain still. For 15 agonizing seconds, nothing happened. Ragnar locked onto Laura with predatory focus, its claws twitching slightly as though ready to strike. Then, without warning, it lowered itself to the ground beside her, curling up like a giant puppy seeking affection. The room fell silent, the tension replaced by disbelief. No one spoke. No one moved. All eyes were fixed on Ragnar, whose behavior defied every expectation. Laura let out a shaky breath, realizing she hadn't even noticed she was holding it. What had just happened? Why hadn't Ragnar attacked? And perhaps most importantly, why did it now seem content to simply sit next to her? Major Carter broke the silence first, his voice tight with frustration. "What the hell was that?" he demanded, glaring at the technicians operating the equipment. Did something malfunction? Was the neural implant not working properly? Daniel shook his head quickly. "No, sir. Everything checked out fine. The system was functioning exactly as intended." "Then explain this," Carter snapped, gesturing toward the screen showing Ragnar lying peacefully beside Laura. "That thing should have torn her limb from limb." Laura finally found her voice. "Maybe it didn't, because it didn't want to," she suggested cautiously. "Maybe it chose not to attack," Carter scoffed. "Don't be ridiculous. It's an animal. A dangerous one. Animals don't choose anything." But Laura wasn't convinced. Something about Ragnar's actions felt deliberate, almost calculated. As much as she hated to admit it, she couldn't ignore the possibility that the creature was smarter than anyone had anticipated. And if that was true, then everything they thought they knew about it and their plans for it might need to change. The storm outside showed no signs of letting up, mirroring the turmoil brewing within the research facility. For now, Ragnar remained calm, its massive form curled protectively around Laura. Whether it was acting out of instinct, intelligence, or something else entirely, no one could say for sure. But one thing was certain. Whatever happened next, nothing would ever be the same again. The room was silent except for the hum of machines and the faint crackle of static from the intercom. Everyone stared at the screen showing Ragnar, its massive form curled up beside Laura, as though it belonged there. No one could believe what they had just witnessed. Major Ryan Carter paced back and forth, his boots clicking against the cold floor. His face was red with frustration, and his hands clenched into fists at his sides. "What just happened?" he barked, glaring at the technicians. "That thing is supposed to be a weapon, a monster. Why didn't it attack?" Dr. Laura Hayes stood frozen in place, her heart still pounding from the adrenaline rush. She glanced at Ragnar, who seemed completely calm now, its glowing eyes half closed as if it were relaxed. For a moment, she wondered if the creature understood, more than anyone gave it credit for. But before she could say anything, Daniel, the young technician, spoke up. "Sir, maybe it didn't want to," Daniel said hesitantly. His voice was quiet, almost timid, but his words carried weight. "It chose not to attack." Carter stopped pacing and turned sharply toward Daniel. "Chose? Don't talk nonsense. It's an animal, a dangerous alien creature. Animals don't make choices like that." Laura stepped forward, her voice steady despite the knot of nerves in her stomach. "Major, we can't ignore what we saw." Ragnar didn't act on instinct. It responded differently. "Maybe it's more intelligent than we thought." Carter's expression hardened. "Intelligent or not, it doesn't matter. We need results. If it won't follow orders, then it's useless to us." He jabbed a finger at the screen. "Run the test again. This time I'll give the command myself. And this time it better do what it's told." Laura's stomach dropped. She knew repeating the experiment would only put her and Ragnar at risk again, but arguing with Carter was pointless. He wouldn't listen, especially not when the military's agenda was involved. Instead, she tried a different approach. "Major, forcing Ragnar to obey might not work. If it's truly intelligent, we should try to understand it instead of treating it like a tool. Carter scoffed. Understand it? That's your job, Doctor. My job is to make sure it does what we need it to do. So either you cooperate or I'll find someone who will. The room fell silent again. The weight of Carter's words hung in the air, heavy and unavoidable. Laura exchanged a glance with Daniel, who looked as uneasy as she felt. They both knew there was no way out of this. The test would happen whether they liked it or not. Later that evening, after the initial shock had worn off, the team gathered in the control room to prepare for the second trial. The mood was tense with everyone avoiding eye contact. Emily, the junior researcher, sat quietly at her station, typing furiously on her laptop. Her earlier excitement had faded, replaced by a nervous energy that made her fidget constantly. Laura approached her cautiously. "Emily, are you okay?" she asked gently. Emily looked up, startled. "Oh yeah, I'm fine, just thinking." "About what?" Emily hesitated before answering. "I don't know. Everything, I guess." "What happened?" "Earlier, it doesn't make sense. I mean, why would Ragnar behave like that? It's supposed to be aggressive, right? But it wasn't. It was gentle." Laura nodded slowly. "That's what I've been trying to figure out too. Maybe we're missing something important." Emily frowned. "But if it's intelligent, doesn't that change everything? I mean, we've been treating it like a lab rat, but what if it's more than that? What if it's alive in ways we don't understand?" Laura smiled faintly. "Exactly. That's why we need to be careful. Rushing into another test without understanding Ragnar could be dangerous for all of us." Before Emily could respond, Carter's voice cut through the room. "Enough chit-chat, let's get moving. We're running this again in 10 minutes. The team scrambled to their positions, double-checking equipment and reviewing protocols. Laura took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. As much as she dreaded repeating the experiment, she knew she had to stay focused. If anything went wrong, she needed to be ready. When the time came, Laura found herself standing in the testing chamber once again. Her palms were sweaty, and her legs felt like jelly, but she forced herself to remain calm. Across the room, Carter stood behind the glass partition, his arms crossed and his expression unreadable. Beside him, Daniel monitored the controls, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. "Remember," Carter said over the intercom, his voice sharp and commanding. "This time, it follows orders. No excuses." Laura swallowed hard and nodded. She glanced at Ragnar, who had been brought into the chamber moments earlier. The creature's golden eyes locked onto hers, and for a brief second, she felt a strange connection, a flicker of understanding that sent shivers down her spine. "Begin the test," Carter ordered. The lights dimmed slightly, signaling the start of the experiment. Ragnar shifted its weight, its claws scraping softly against the floor. Laura's heart raced as she waited for Carter's next move. Finally, his voice boomed through the speakers. "Ragnar, rip her apart." Time seemed to slow as Ragnar turned, its gaze toward Laura, its body tensed, muscles coiling beneath its shimmering exoskeleton. For a moment it looked like it might lunge, but then, just as before, it lowered itself to the ground. Instead of attacking, it moved closer to Laura, its movements deliberate and cautious. When it reached her, it stopped and simply sat there, its massive form towering over her, yet somehow non-threatening. Laura let out a shaky breath, relief washing over her. She couldn't explain why Ragnar had spared her again, but she was grateful. Slowly, she extended a hand, her fingers trembling as they hovered near the creature's head. To her astonishment, Ragnar leaned into her touch, its skin cool and smooth beneath her palm. Behind the glass, Carter slammed his fist against the console. "What is wrong with this thing? Why isn't it following orders?" Daniel typed furiously on his keyboard, analyzing the data streaming in from Ragnar's neural implant. "Sir, I'm not seeing any anomalies. The implant is functioning perfectly. It's receiving the commands, it's just choosing not to act on them." "Choosing?" Carter snapped. "That's impossible, it's an animal." Laura spoke into her microphone, her voice calm but firm. Major, I think we need to reconsider our approach. Clearly, Ragnar isn't responding the way we expected. Maybe it's time to stop treating it like a weapon and start learning about it instead. Carter glared at her through the glass. Learning about it won't win wars, Doctor. We need results now. Despite his anger, Laura refused to back down. And rushing blindly into this won't help either. If we keep pushing Ragnar, we might provoke it in ways we can't predict. Is that really worth the risk? For a long moment, Carter didn't respond. His jaw tightened as he stared at her, clearly weighing his options. Finally, he sighed and turned away. Fine. Shut it down for now. But this isn't over. As the team began shutting down the equipment, Laura stayed in the chamber with Ragnar. The creature remained where it was, its presence oddly comforting despite its size. She knelt beside it, studying its features closely. There was so much about Ragnar that she didn't understand, so much that defied logic. But one thing was clear. It wasn't the mindless monster everyone had assumed it to be. When she finally left the chamber, Daniel was waiting for her outside. "You okay?" he asked, concern etched on his face. Laura nodded. "Yeah, thanks. Listen, I need your help. We have to find out more about Ragnar. What makes it tick, how it thinks. If we can prove it's intelligent, maybe we can convince Carter to ease up." Daniel hesitated before nodding. "I'm with you. But we'll have to be careful. If Carter finds out—" "I know," Laura interrupted. "But we don't have a choice. Not anymore." As they walked back to the control room, Laura couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the brink of something extraordinary. Ragnar had shown them mercy twice now, and in doing so, it had opened a door to possibilities no one had considered before. Whatever lay ahead, one thing was certain. The journey was far from over. The days following the second test were filled with tension and uncertainty. The team worked tirelessly to analyze Ragnar's behavior, trying to make sense of its actions. Major Ryan Carter was growing increasingly impatient, his frustration boiling over during every meeting. He demanded answers, but no one had any concrete explanations. Laura and Daniel, however, were determined to uncover the truth, not just for their own curiosity, but because they believed Ragnar deserved more than to be treated as a weapon. Late one night, after most of the team had gone to bed, Laura found herself alone in the lab. She sat at her desk, surrounded by papers and notes, staring at footage of Ragnar from the previous tests. Her mind raced with questions. Why had it refused to attack? What did its calm demeanor mean? And most importantly, how could she prove that Ragnar was more than just an animal? As she replayed the videos, something caught her eye, a subtle movement in Ragnar's posture when certain commands were given. It wasn't aggression or confusion. It almost looked like hesitation. She leaned closer to the screen, rewinding the footage several times to study it carefully. There was definitely something there, something deliberate about the way Ragnar reacted. Just then, Daniel walked into the lab carrying a cup of coffee. "Still working?" he asked softly, setting the cup down beside her. Laura nodded without looking away from the screen. "Yeah, I can't stop thinking about it. There's something we're missing here." Daniel pulled up a chair and joined her. "What do you mean?" She pointed to the screen. "Look at this, right here, when Carter gave the command. Watch Ragnar's body language." Daniel squinted at the video. After a moment, his eyes widened. "You're right. It doesn't look like it's ignoring the order. It looks like it's deciding not to follow it." "Exactly," Laura said, excitement creeping into her voice. "That's intelligence, Daniel, real decision-making. It's not acting on instinct, it's choosing what to do." Daniel frowned thoughtfully. "If that's true, then we've been wrong about it all along. This isn't some mindless beast. It's smart, maybe even sentient." Laura nodded. "And if we can prove that, maybe we can change how everyone sees it, including Carter." The next morning, Laura and Daniel presented their findings to the rest of the team. They showed clips of Ragnar's behavior, highlighting moments where it seemed to pause and consider its actions before responding. Emily listened intently, her expression shifting from skepticism to intrigue as the evidence mounted. Even Carter, who usually dismissed such theories outright, couldn't ignore the patterns they pointed out. "This is interesting," Emily admitted reluctantly. "But how do we know for sure? Just because it hesitates doesn't mean it's intelligent. Could just be reacting to environmental factors." "That's why we need to run more experiments," Laura replied. "Not combat tests, observation-based ones. We need to see how it interacts with different stimuli, how it solves problems, and whether it shows signs of learning." Carter crossed his arms, clearly unconvinced. "And what happens if your little theory turns out to be wrong? Then we've wasted time and resources chasing fairy tales while our real mission gets delayed." "It won't be a waste," Laura insisted. "Even if we don't find proof of intelligence, we'll still learn valuable information about Ragnar. Isn't that worth pursuing?" After a long pause, Carter sighed. "Fine. Do your experiments. But don't expect me to sit around waiting forever. If this doesn't lead anywhere, we're going back to the original plan." With Carter's reluctant approval, Laura and Daniel began designing new tests to explore Ragnar's capabilities. Over the next few days, they introduced various challenges into the creature's environment: puzzles, mazes, and objects that required manipulation to obtain food. To their amazement, Ragnar excelled at each task, often solving them faster than expected. One evening, as Laura observed Ragnar navigating a particularly complex maze, she noticed something remarkable. The creature didn't just rely on trial and error. It appeared to strategize, pausing to assess the situation before making its next move. When it reached the end and retrieved the reward, a piece of synthetic meat, it let out a low rumble. That sounded almost like satisfaction. Daniel grinned as he jotted down notes. "This is incredible. It's not just reacting, it's planning ahead." Laura smiled faintly, feeling a mix of awe and guilt. "We should have done this sooner. Imagine how much we could have learned if we hadn't focused so much on using it as a weapon." As the experiments continued, Laura spent more time interacting with Ragnar directly. She brought it small gifts, extra food, shiny objects, and even music played through speakers in its chamber. At first, the creature seemed, wary, keeping its distance and observing her cautiously, but gradually it began to warm up, approaching her with curiosity rather than fear. One night, after hours of observation, Laura decided to stay late again. She sat cross-legged on the floor of Ragnar's chamber, watching as it explored the space around her. For once, she wasn't conducting an experiment or taking notes. She simply wanted to connect. "You're amazing, you know that?" she murmured, her voice soft. "Everyone thinks you're dangerous, but you're so much more than that." To her surprise, Ragnar responded by moving closer, lowering itself onto the ground beside her, its massive head tilted slightly, as if listening. Laura reached out tentatively, placing a hand on its cool exoskeleton. Instead of pulling away, Ragnar pressed gently against her palm, mimicking the gesture. Tears welled up in Laura's eyes as she realized the depth of trust Ragnar was showing. In that moment, she knew beyond a doubt that it was intelligent, not just capable of learning, but also of forming bonds. Whatever it wasn't just an alien creature. It was a living being. Despite these breakthroughs, tensions within the team remained high. Carter grew increasingly frustrated with the lack of progress toward weaponizing Ragnar. He accused Laura and Daniel of wasting time on pointless experiments, insisting that they return to the original plan. But Laura refused to back down, presenting her findings at every opportunity. During one heated argument, Emily unexpectedly spoke up in support of Laura. "Major, maybe we should listen to her. Look at the data. It's undeniable. Ragnar isn't just following instincts, it's thinking, adapting, learning. If we keep pushing it as a weapon, we might lose the chance to understand it completely." Carter glared at her but said nothing. For the first time, it seemed like others were starting to see things differently. As the days passed, Laura and Daniel uncovered even more evidence of Ragnar's intelligence. They documented instances of problem-solving, memory retention, and even what appeared to be emotional responses. Each discovery strengthened their case, slowly convincing the rest of the team that Ragnar was far more complex than anyone had imagined. But amidst the excitement, Laura couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of time. Carter's patience was wearing thin, and she knew it was only a matter of time before he forced their hand. If they wanted to protect Ragnar and themselves, they needed to act quickly. One evening, as she reviewed the latest batch of data, Laura turned to Daniel. "We need to dig deeper, find out everything we can about Ragnar's neural implant. There has to be something we're missing, something that explains why it behaves the way it does." Daniel nodded, his expression serious. "I'll start looking into it tonight. Whatever we find, it might be our only shot at changing Carter's mind." As they worked together, poring over files and analyzing readings, Laura felt a spark of hope. Despite the challenges ahead, she believed they were on the verge of something groundbreaking. Ragnar had already proven that it was more than just a monster. Now, it was up to them to ensure the world saw it for what it truly was, a remarkable, intelligent life form deserving of respect and understanding. The days turned into weeks as Laura and Daniel continued their work, diving deeper into Ragnar's behavior and the data collected from its neural implant. The more they studied, the clearer it became that Ragnar was unlike anything they had ever encountered. It wasn't just intelligent. It was emotionally complex, capable of forming connections and responding to kindness in ways no one had expected. One evening, while reviewing old footage of Ragnar's initial capture, Daniel noticed something strange. The neural implant readings showed fluctuations during the moments when Ragnar was first brought aboard the spacecraft. These fluctuations didn't match the usual patterns of stress or aggression. Instead, they resembled what humans might experience during confusion or fear. "Laura," Daniel called out, his voice filled with urgency. "You need to see this." Laura hurried over, her eyes scanning the screen. "What is it?" "It's the implant data from when Ragnar was captured. Look at these spikes, they're not random. They correlate with specific actions taken by the crew. Someone tampered with the system." Laura's brow furrowed as she processed the information. "Tampered? Are you saying someone deliberately altered the readings?" Daniel nodded. "Exactly. Whoever did it wanted Ragnar to appear more dangerous than it really was. They made it seem uncontrollable on purpose." A cold feeling settled in Laura's stomach. If someone had manipulated the data, it meant Ragnar's reputation as a monster was built on lies. But who would do such a thing and why? The next morning, Laura and Daniel decided to share their findings with Emily. She had been supportive of their efforts so far, and they trusted her enough to involve her in the investigation. Sitting together in a quiet corner of the lab, they explained everything. Emily listened intently, her expression growing darker with each revelation. "So, you're telling me someone on our team faked the data?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "We think so," Laura replied. "Whoever it was wanted to make Ragnar look like a threat. That way the military would have an excuse to use it as a weapon." "But why?" Emily pressed. "What's the point of all this?" "That's what we need to figure out," Daniel said. "Whoever did it must have had a reason, maybe pressure from higher-ups or personal gain. Either way, it explains why Ragnar hasn't acted aggressively despite being labeled as dangerous." Emily sighed, rubbing her temples. "This is bad. Really bad. If Carter finds out about this, he'll go ballistic." "We can't tell him yet," Laura said firmly. "Not until we know for sure who's behind it. For now, we keep this between us." Emily hesitated but eventually nodded. "All right, I'm in. But we need to be careful. If whoever did this realizes we're onto them, things could get ugly." As the three of them worked together to uncover the truth, tensions within the facility began to rise. Major Ryan Carter grew increasingly suspicious of Laura and Daniel's activities, often questioning their motives during meetings. He demanded updates on their progress, pushing for results that aligned with the military's goals. Laura did her best to deflect his inquiries, steering the conversation back to Ragnar's intelligence and potential for peaceful interaction. Despite the mounting pressure, Laura found solace in her time with Ragnar. Every night, After the others had left, she visited the creature in its chamber. She brought it food, played soft music, and even read aloud from books she had borrowed from the base library. To her surprise, Ragnar seemed to enjoy these moments, often resting its massive head near her feet or mimicking her movements. One evening, as Laura sat beside Ragnar, she felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. Here was a creature that had been misunderstood, mistreated, and feared simply because of its appearance. Yet beneath its alien exterior lay a mind capable of compassion and connection. She realized then that her mission wasn't just about proving Ragnar's intelligence. It was about giving it a chance to exist without judgment or fear. Back in the lab, Daniel and Emily pored over files, searching for any clue that might lead them to the person responsible for tampering with the neural implant. After hours of painstaking analysis, Emily stumbled upon something unusual. A series of encrypted messages sent from one of the terminals shortly after Ragnar's arrival. The sender's name was redacted, but the content hinted at instructions to falsify data. "This has to be it," Emily whispered, her hands shaking as she pointed to the screen. Whoever sent these messages knew exactly what they were doing. Daniel frowned. "Do you think you can trace the origin?" "I'll try," Emily replied, typing furiously. "But if I'm right, this goes all the way to the top." As Emily worked, Laura joined them, bringing coffee and snacks. The air was thick with anticipation as they waited for the results. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Emily leaned back in her chair, her face pale. "I found it," she said quietly. "It was me." Laura and Daniel stared at her, stunned. "What do you mean, you?" Laura asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Tears welled up in Emily's eyes as she explained. "I didn't want to do it, I swear, but my superiors threatened to cut funding for the entire project unless I made Ragnar look dangerous. They said it was the only way to secure support from the military. I thought I was doing the right thing, but now I realize how wrong I was." The room fell silent as the weight of her confession sank in. Laura felt a mix of anger and sadness, but also understanding. Emily wasn't evil. She was just caught in a system that prioritized power over ethics. "You need to come clean," Laura said finally. "Tell Carter everything. If we don't, someone else will, and it'll only make things worse." Emily nodded, wiping her tears. "You're right. I'll do it tomorrow. But please don't let them hurt Ragnar. Please." "We won't," Laura promised. "No matter what happens, we'll protect it." The following day, Emily gathered her courage and confessed to Carter and the rest of the team. Her admission sent shockwaves through the facility, forcing everyone to confront the reality of what they had done. Carter, though furious, couldn't deny the evidence. The tampered data had painted a false picture of Ragnar, leading to misguided decisions and unnecessary fear. In the aftermath, the mood shifted. While some members of the team remained skeptical, others began to see Ragnar in a new light. Even Carter softened slightly, agreeing to suspend combat testing indefinitely. For the first time since the project began, there was a glimmer of hope. That evening, Laura returned to Ragnar's chamber carrying a small gift, a shiny metal orb she had found in the storage room. As she entered, Ragnar greeted her with a low rumble, its golden eyes glowing warmly. She smiled, placing the orb on the floor between them. "You deserve better than what we've given you," she said softly. "And I promise, I'll do everything I can to make sure you get it." Ragnar tilted its head, watching her curiously before nudging the orb with one of its claws. Laura laughed, the sound echoing through the chamber. In that moment, surrounded by the hum of machines and the icy winds outside, she felt a rare sense of peace. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she knew they would face them together. Not as scientist and subject, but as two beings bound by trust and understanding. The days that followed Emily's confession were tense but transformative. The revelation about the tampered data forced everyone at the facility to reconsider their assumptions about Ragnar. While Major Ryan Carter still viewed the creature as a potential asset, His approach softened slightly. He agreed to suspend combat testing for the time being, allowing Laura and her team to focus on understanding Ragnar's intelligence and behavior. Laura felt a mix of relief and determination. She knew they had made progress, but the battle wasn't over yet. Protecting Ragnar meant more than just proving its intelligence, it meant ensuring it was treated with respect and care. Every interaction mattered. Every observation counted. She spent long hours in the lab, analyzing data and documenting Ragnar's responses to various stimuli. Daniel stayed by her side, helping refine their methods and ensuring everything was recorded accurately. Emily, meanwhile, worked tirelessly to make amends. Though her betrayal had shaken the team's trust, she threw herself into the new mission, determined to prove she could be part of the solution. Her technical skills proved invaluable as she developed tools to monitor Ragnar's neural activity without causing discomfort. Slowly, she began earning back some of the respect she had lost. One evening, as Laura reviewed footage of Ragnar interacting with objects in its chamber, she noticed something remarkable. The creature had been given a series of blocks of different shapes and sizes. Instead of knocking them over or ignoring them, Ragnar carefully arranged them into patterns, stacking smaller blocks on larger ones and creating what looked like deliberate designs. "Daniel," Laura called out, excitement bubbling in her voice. "Come look at this." Daniel hurried over, his eyes widening as he watched the video. "That's incredible. It's not just playing around, it's building something." "It looks like it's experimenting," Laura added, "testing how things fit together, seeing what works and what doesn't. This is advanced problem solving." They decided to test Ragnar further, introducing more complex puzzles and tasks. Each time the creature surprised them with its ingenuity. It solved mazes, manipulated levers to retrieve food, and even mimicked gestures Laura demonstrated. The evidence was undeniable. Ragnar wasn't just intelligent, it was creative. Word of these discoveries spread quickly among the team. Even Carter, who had initially dismissed such experiments as irrelevant, seemed intrigued. During one meeting, he leaned forward, his arms crossed as usual, but his tone was less confrontational than before. "So, what you're saying is, this thing isn't just following orders. It's thinking for itself?" he asked, glancing at Laura. "That's right," Laura replied confidently. "Ragnar has shown clear signs of decision-making, memory retention, and even emotional responses. Treating it as a weapon would be a mistake, not just ethically but strategically." Carter frowned, clearly wrestling with the implications. "Fine. Keep doing your tests, but remember, my priority is still making sure this facility stays secure. If anything changes, if Ragnar shows any sign of aggression, you report it immediately." Laura nodded, knowing she had pushed as far as she could for now. For the first time, she felt a cautious optimism. Maybe, just maybe, they could shift the narrative entirely. Despite the progress, not everyone was convinced. Some members of the military contingent continued to view Ragnar as a threat, while others remained skeptical of its intelligence. Tensions simmered beneath the surface, ready to boil over at the slightest provocation. Laura knew they couldn't afford to let their guard down. Late one night, after most of the team had gone to bed, Laura found herself alone in the control room. She stared at the monitors showing live footage of Ragnar's chamber. The creature was resting, its massive form curled up near the corner. Watching it, Laura felt a deep sense of responsibility. Ragnar had trusted her, and she couldn't let it down. Suddenly the lights flickered, plunging the room into darkness. Alarms blared, their piercing wails echoing through the facility. Laura jumped to her feet, her heart racing. A power failure? In this remote location, that could mean disaster. She grabbed a flashlight and rushed toward Ragnar's chamber. Along the way, she passed other team members scrambling to restore power and secure the building. Panic was spreading fast, but Laura kept her focus. Her priority was Ragnar. When she reached the chamber, she froze. The reinforced door was wide open and Ragnar was nowhere to be seen. Fear gripped her chest as she stepped inside, shining her flashlight around the empty space. Had the creature escaped? Was it loose in the facility? Before she could process what was happening, a low rumble echoed behind her. She spun around, her light landing on Ragnar crouched defensively in the hallway. Its glowing eyes scanned the area, its claws raised as though preparing to strike. Surrounding it were several armed guards, their weapons trained on the creature. "No!" Laura shouted, rushing forward. "Stand down, it's not attacking." The guards hesitated, their weapons wavering. Laura positioned herself between them and Ragnar, her hands raised in a gesture of peace. "It's okay," she said softly, addressing both Ragnar and the guards. "Everything's going to be fine." For a moment, no one moved. Ragnar's body relaxed slightly, its posture shifting from defensive to curious. The guards lowered their weapons cautiously, though their expressions remained wary. Major Carter arrived moments later, his face flushed with anger. "What's going on here? Why is it out of containment?" "It must have broken free during the power outage," one of the guards explained. "We found it wandering near the labs." Carter glared at Ragnar, his hand hovering near his sidearm. "This confirms it. It's dangerous. We need to neutralize the threat." "No," Laura snapped, stepping closer to Ragnar. "It didn't attack anyone. It stayed calm even when surrounded by armed soldiers. Doesn't that tell you something?" Carter hesitated, his jaw tightening. Finally, he sighed. "Fine, get it back into containment. But if there's another incident like this, we're taking action." As the guards guided Ragnar back to its chamber, Laura felt a wave of gratitude and guilt. Gratitude because Ragnar had proven once again that it was capable of restraint, and guilt because she knew the situation was her fault. If she hadn't left the control room unattended, the door wouldn't have opened accidentally. Later that night, after the power had been restored and the facility secured, Laura returned to Ragnar's chamber. The creature was lying on the floor, its golden eyes watching her intently. She knelt beside it, placing a gentle hand on its exoskeleton. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I should have been here. I shouldn't have let this happen." Ragnar rumbled softly, pressing its head against her palm. It was a gesture of forgiveness, a reminder that trust went both ways. As Laura sat there, listening to the hum of machines and the distant howl of the wind outside, she realized something important. Protecting Ragnar wasn't just about keeping it safe. It was about changing the way people thought, about showing them that intelligence and compassion weren't limited to humans, about proving that coexistence was possible, even with beings so different from themselves. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Laura knew she wouldn't face them alone. With Daniel and Emily by her side, and Ragnar trusting her every step of the way, she believed they could create a future where fear didn't dictate decisions, a future where understanding triumphed over ignorance. And for the first time since the project began, that future felt within reach. The days following the power outage marked a turning point at the research facility. The incident had shaken everyone, but it also opened their eyes to Ragnar's true nature. Instead of attacking or causing chaos during the blackout, the creature had remained calm. Its actions spoke louder than any experiment ever could. Slowly, attitudes began to shift. Major Ryan Carter still kept a cautious distance, but even he couldn't deny that Ragnar was different from what they had assumed. Laura and her team worked tirelessly to rebuild trust, not just with Ragnar, but within the group itself. Emily continued to make amends, using her technical expertise to improve the conditions of Ragnar's chamber. She installed softer lighting, added enrichment tools like puzzles and toys, and ensured the environment was as comfortable as possible. Daniel focused on analyzing Ragnar's behavior, documenting every interaction in detail. Together, they painted a clearer picture of the creature's intelligence and emotional depth. Ragnar seemed to respond positively to these changes. It became more interactive, often seeking out Laura and mimicking her movements. When she brought food, it would tilt its head curiously before accepting it. Sometimes, it even nudged her gently with its claws, almost like a playful gesture. These small moments reinforced Laura's belief that Ragnar wasn't just intelligent, it was capable of forming bonds. One evening, as snow fell heavily outside, Laura sat cross-legged on the floor of Ragnar's chamber. She had brought a book with her, something she had started doing recently. Reading aloud felt soothing, not just for her, but for Ragnar too. Tonight, she chose a story about friendship, a tale of two unlikely companions overcoming obstacles, together. As she read, Ragnar rested its massive body nearby, its glowing eyes half closed in contentment. Occasionally it let out a low rumble, as if responding to the words. Laura smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. This was more than science. It was connection. For the first time in her career, she felt like she was truly making a difference, not just in understanding Ragnar, but in changing how others saw it. When she finished the chapter, she closed the book and looked at Ragnar. "Do you think we'll always be able to stay like this?" she asked softly. "Just you and me learning from each other?" Ragnar tilted its head, its golden eyes meeting hers. It didn't answer, of course, but the moment felt profound nonetheless. Laura knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would still be skeptics, challenges, and moments of doubt. But for now, in this quiet space, everything felt right. The next morning, the team gathered in the control room for a meeting. Laura stood at the front, presenting her findings alongside Daniel and Emily. They shared videos of Ragnar solving puzzles, mimicking gestures, and responding to kindness. The evidence was overwhelming. Ragnar wasn't just an alien creature. It was a sentient being capable of thought, emotion, and connection. Major Carter listened silently, his expression unreadable. When Laura finished speaking, he leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. Finally, he spoke. "All right," he said slowly. "I see your point. Maybe we've been going about this the wrong way." Laura exchanged a glance with Daniel and Emily, surprised by his admission. "So what happens now?" she asked cautiously. Carter sighed. "We adjust our approach. No more combat testing. From here on out, we focus on studying Ragnar's intelligence and finding ways to communicate with it. If it really is as smart as you say, then forcing it into a role it doesn't want isn't going to work." The room erupted into murmurs of relief. Laura felt a surge of hope. This was the breakthrough they had been working toward, a chance to redefine Ragnar's place in their world. Over the following weeks, the facility transformed. Gone were the weapons and aggressive commands. In their place came new tools designed to foster communication and understanding. Laura and Daniel worked on developing a rudimentary language system, using symbols and sounds to interact with Ragnar. Emily helped design devices that translated Ragnar's vocalizations into patterns the team could analyze. Progress was slow, but steady. Ragnar responded eagerly to the experiments, often surprising them with its quick learning. One day, it managed to replicate a sequence of symbols after seeing them only once. Another time, it used its claws to draw shapes on the floor that matched images shown on a screen. Each success brought the team closer to bridging the gap between species. Even Carter softened further, occasionally joining the sessions to observe Ragnar's progress. Though he rarely spoke, his presence signaled a growing acceptance of the new direction. Laura noticed subtle changes in him too. He no longer referred to Ragnar as it, or the creature. Instead, he called it by name, acknowledging its individuality. Despite the positive changes, challenges remained. News of Ragnar's existence eventually reached higher authorities, sparking debates about its future. Some argued that keeping such a powerful being confined was unethical, while others feared releasing it could pose risks. Laura found herself caught in the middle, advocating for a balanced approach. "We can't send Ragnar back to where it came from," she explained during one heated discussion. "We don't know enough about its home planet, or whether it has one anymore. But we also can't keep it locked up forever. It deserves freedom, just like any living being." Her words resonated with many, though not everyone agreed. In the end, a compromise was reached. Ragnar would remain at the facility for now, but efforts would begin to create a larger, more natural habitat where it could live without confinement. It wasn't perfect, but it was a step in the right direction. Months, passed and the bond between Laura and Ragnar grew stronger. She visited it daily, sharing stories, playing music, and simply sitting quietly together. Ragnar seemed to enjoy these moments as much as she did, often curling up beside her like a loyal companion. Their relationship became a symbol of hope, not just for the team but for humanity's potential to coexist with the unknown. One snowy afternoon, as Laura watched Ragnar explore its newly expanded habitat, she felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The journey had been long and difficult, filled with setbacks and doubts, but through perseverance and empathy, they had achieved something extraordinary. Ragnar wasn't just a subject of study. It was a partner, a friend, and a reminder of what was possible when fear gave way to understanding. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the icy landscape, Laura placed a hand on Ragnar's cool exoskeleton. "Thank you," she whispered, "for trusting me, for teaching us." Ragnar rumbled softly, leaning into her touch. Outside, the wind howled, carrying with it the promise of endless possibilities. Whatever lay ahead, Laura knew they would face it together, not as scientist and subject, but as equals bound by mutual respect and trust. And in that moment, surrounded by the vastness of the Alaskan wilderness, Laura realized that their story was far from over. It was just the beginning.